Hey, welcome back to day 61 of Project Me. Today I want to talk a little bit about something that's been on my mind a little bit for the past few days. Half funny, half sort of serious. It's politics, actually, and I'm not going to, speak about divisive things, but um, someone I've worked quite closely with for the past few weeks. He's a fellow law student. He's an older gentleman, maybe about 40, late 40s, 50 years old. Uh, Immigrant. He's come here, and I've worked quite closely with him for a bit, and he's been encouraging me to get into politics. And it's not just joking encouragement. He he went so far as today to invite me to, because we live in the capital. We're quite privileged to be able to go down to Parliament and watch the debates. And today the new budget is being released. So we walked down from the law school, which is right across the road from Parliament. Again, another privilege. And we went and sat down and watched the budget debate. And my point is, this man was networking on my behalf in the bleachers, watching the politicians as they spoke their speeches and everything. And as he puts it, he's firmly in my camp. He just wants to know where I stand on politics. But it's really hard coming to terms with the idea of running for politics. I mean, I grew up in the States. For about 16 years before coming here, I see just how ineffective and divisive that government is, and being a career politician for that reason has never ever sort of appealed. I've genuinely always sort of thought I'd end up in politics one way or another, purely because, be the change you want to see. But actually making a choice to go into politics was never something I thought I'd make. It's never something I actually considered until this gentleman kept pushing me for the last few weeks on it. And I'm really quite divided. Today, more than any other day probably of the year, you see just how divisive the politics are in this country. The government releases the budget, the opposition tries to tear it apart, and it seems like there's just absolutely no room for compromise. Which I find really hard to reconcile with myself. Compromise is a big part of what I think government is. But the language I hear people speaking in is so discouraging. People, and to some extent, no one's above this. We all suffer to different degrees. But what I'm trying to say is people speak very often in very plain language. They speak in black and white terms and completely forget that there is a grey area which we all share. But they love to sit on the extremes and forget about everything in the middle. And I just find that very hard to reconcile with who I am as a person. When I look at politics, all I see is grey, and yet the language I see is black and white. It's discouraging in that way. And so when this gentleman's been telling me, pick a side, I need to know where you land, we'll start getting you sorted, we'll start making the connections. He's half joking, I'm sure, but he keeps pushing it, and he does keep doing things for me, which does tell me he's somewhat serious about this. But what bothers me is it just, like, I there's a part of me that does want to do it, but I always thought I'd do it far later in my life, when I've got proper life experience behind me. I've worked in government and I've worked in the private sector. I've perhaps served in the military and understand, and I hope to learn from serving in the military, that force is a last resort. It should never ever come to that. Among other things, I thought I'd have this whole wealth of experience behind me if I ever decided to go into politics. But, and hopefully by that point I'd have, firmly found my views, and hopefully picked a side by then, or at least put my foot down somewhere, But the more I sort of care to make the world a better place, the more I feel disincentivized by what is the political environment. You have the left and the right, you have these labels, and people get so firmly attached to these labels that they're so proud to present to the world, but they're unable to find compromise in between. Neutrality is a long lost concept. You're either with me or against me. There's no neutrality anymore. If you don't agree with me, you're against me. And it tears me apart, because that's not really what democracy is. Nor is it about what progress is, to be honest. So I suppose this has been a bit of a ramble, but what I'm really getting at is I'm really struggling to reconcile myself with the idea of politics. Despite always wanting to go into it to some extent, I just feel so left behind by what it is to be in politics, I suppose. I was turned down for a job at a commercial law firm the other day, purely because, and this is the feedback I received when I asked for it, because although they said I was, all positive feedback, articulate, well-spoken, composed, thoughtful, while they thought I was all of that, the only reason they didn't offer me the job, they said, was because they weren't sure I was as interested in commercial law as I was in policy or politics. And I remember sitting there on the phone call, and again at the email when they sent me the written feedback that I requested, and I remember thinking, they spotted it. They're right on. I would have felt so guilty taking that job, because it's just not who I am. Working at a commercial law firm is for clients is not who I am. I've always sort of thought of myself as a public servant. My success isn't success if it doesn't benefit those around me, or at least lead to the greater good. So fundamentally, this is really a personal difficulty in reconciling the part of me that wants to serve the greater good, which is inevitably through politics, but also the environment that is politics. And maybe that's because I just haven't sort of picked a side on the political spectrum. I haven't put my foot down. But you could point to all other sort of social reasons for why the political environment is worse off today than it was. And it's always been bad. We forget that it's always been bad. You look at history and you realize just how divisive politics has always been. But and everyone in their time has always been a little bit of a doomsayer, saying, it's worse now than it's ever been, or we're at a critical juncture now. If we don't change the way things are done, then it's going to go down the drain. Whatever it might be. I don't want to be another doomsayer. But it is a very challenging environment. Social media doesn't make it any better. It makes it far easier for people to think that they're subject matter experts, simply because they read something somewhere, or they saw a reel on TikTok, or whatever it is. So I genuinely, I'm just not sure where to go. I've always thought of being a public servant, again through politics, and now with this gentleman saying, go into politics itself, I sort of feel myself recoiling and sort of flinching at the very thought. Why? I don't want to do private, I want to serve people, but why would I want to serve people if it comes at such a hefty cost to myself? I think. And I understand, being a public servant isn't about, yourself. It's about serving others. But at a certain point, man's got to live, right? So I'm not sure. Bit of a ramble, but that's just sort of where my head's at the moment. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do because this does determine the direction my life goes in. Yeah, just not sure. But anyways, that's what's been on my mind. It's been weighing on me for a little bit now. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna end it there for now. Maybe I'll have some more thoughts on it in the next few days once I've sort of processed these thoughts and feelings a bit more, I suppose. But anyways, I'm wishing you all the very best. I hope you all have a fantastic week. Please, live life well. Take care, guys. All the best. Cheers.